Hi, everyone. Welcome in. We're going to give it a few here to let everyone jump on board. Hope everyone's had a good Wednesday so far. Hi there. If you're just joining, welcome. We're going to give everyone a few minutes to jump on in. And we'll get started here shortly. Okay, if you're just joining us, welcome. My name is Macaulay Hammond. I'll be the moderator this evening. If you'll check the chat, we've asked the question, what is one of your most memorable experiences with the arts? And we'd love for you to take a moment as you're joining to think through that question and respond directly there in the chat. We'll be taking a look at those answers here shortly. Excited to see some of those experiences. We're getting a few back already. Local field trips to art museums. Those were always great times. Antigone at my sister's community college. So we've got some theater, we've got some art museums. We'll give everyone a few more minutes here to jump on board. If you're just joining us, my name is Macaulay Hammond. I am the general manager at Style Weekly. I'll be the moderator this evening. We've got a really exciting evening full of thrilling conversation ahead. If you're just joining, check the chat. We've posted an interesting question. What's one of your most memorable experiences with the arts? And you can answer that directly in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. We've gotten art museums. We've gotten theatrical productions. Feel free to post that in there. One more minute here and we'll get going. Martha Graham Dance Company at Duke University Theater. There you go, dance, theater, art museums. We're checking them off here pretty quickly. Anyway, let's go ahead and get it started. We'll let others catch up when they join. My name is Macaulay Hammond. Like I've said ad nauseum to this point, if you've been on since 6 o'clock, I apologize. But I am the general manager at Style Weekly, and I will be your moderator for this evening's conversation on the arts and social movements. The intent for this evening is really to kind of share the passion for the arts, why art and social movements matter to everyone. So we're going to start the session with a reading from Richmond's inaugural poet laureate, Roscoe Burnhams. So Roscoe, if you're there, we can't wait to hear from you.
Good evening. I am Roscoe Burnhams. I'm the Poet Laureate for Richmond, Virginia. Thank you for having me. The arts have always been important for me. I've been a poet, spoken word artist for a very long time, and a teaching artist for just as long. We do a lot of programs centered around arts education, how to use poetry in a myriad of different ways, how to use poetry as a therapeutic process, how art shows up as activism. So I run the gamut when it comes to topics from mental health and depression to race in America, the school to prison pipeline, you name it. Whatever I'm passionate about makes its way into my art, and I think that's the beauty of art that is to be consumed, is that we have the ability to kind of shape perspectives, change narratives, and expand awareness. So, with all that said, this piece is called Whole Foods. The sun beats down on what whiteness calls a wasteland. Steam resurrects from city streets in waves of heat. Sweat leaks from the skin, tastes like soda. Or lemonade, but the kind that doesn't contain any actual lemons, like water full of lead poisoning, like a Flint, Michigan faucet, but would be the perfect summer, though, for an orange slice. Cold cucumbers cut into coins, but no one can buy that here because ain't no Whole Foods in the hood. Too impoverished to bite the hand that feeds them, the people here are the first to get secondhand food. Boxes of ingredients longer than the list of American atrocities. They get meat that is met with expiration before it meets customers. Vegetables soaked in salty cans, cans that used to be bullets or badges or shackles. Shoot, you can still taste the racism in these cotton picking greens because ain't no Whole Foods in the hood. The trek across a city for organic food might as well be a Sahara, where the sun and the prices rise, but the income doesn't. The climate here produces no fruit. Heart disease sits upon the stoop, passed down from their parents, and poverty. There's project housing, where bodies are packed like sardines or slave ships because ain't no Whole Foods in the hood. No herbs and whole grain, only profiling and pain, and no hospitals close enough to treat either one. And it's all by design. So, like in war, they'll cut off an enemy's food supply so the enemy starves. These ain't just food deserts. This desert storm. This a war on health, trying to bury us in our own bodies, but we've always been seeds. They want to turn that soil into concrete, but that black still ain't crack unless it's a rolls through the concrete because ain't no Whole Foods in the hood. Black people have yet to taste the fruit of their labor or fruit without pesticides, and it bugs me to think that we were given the unhealthiest meals, still churned out the best athletes. We were turned into strange fruit, but gave you the sweetest music. They took away the brain food. We still gave you inventions that keep America running. They want our bodies, but they want to give us diabetes because so ain't no Whole Foods in the hood. They put us in food deserts and asked how we be cactus, how we make all that success out of sand. Took all your godforsaken groceries and made ourselves immortal, but we had to, y'all, because ain't no Whole Foods in the hood. That's that piece. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you so much, Roscoe. That was incredible. And everyone, Roscoe will be hanging around towards the end of the presentation. If you've got any questions, we'll have some time for a Q&A at the end, so hang tight for that because I'm sure there'll be some questions for sure. Okay, Sid, we can go ahead and jump into the welcome slides here if you're ready. So I just want to quickly welcome everyone to the fourth Civic Action Conversation of 2023 brought to you by RVA Engage. Just a quick bit of information about RVA Engage. RVA Engage is a collaboration of community engagement professionals in the nonprofit, corporate, government, and educational sectors. They seek to inform and catalyze community members to engage in the issues that most impact our region. Sid, you can go ahead to the next slide, please, if you don't mind. So tonight's event in the Civic Action Conversation series is brought to you by the following community collaborators: the Bonner Center of Civic Engagement at the University of Richmond, Chamber RVA, the Community Foundation for a Greater Richmond, Plan RVA, and Virginia Commonwealth University. We thank, and VPM, we thank those sponsors. Sid, next slide, please. So Civic Action Conversations, the goals of these are to explore regional critical priorities and possible action steps for every Richmonder. The Civic Action Conversation focuses on critical regional priorities and possible action steps for engagement. The topics of these series are chosen because they reflect some of the highest priorities we see in the community. And so, Sid, without further ado, we are going to go ahead and speak to some of these questions here. I think we've gotten most of them. If you have any more memorable experiences with the arts, we'd love to see your responses here in the chat. And we'll continue to read through those for the rest of the evening. Just a few housekeeping questions and answers here. So all of the resources throughout the evening, if you hear from a speaker or if you hear from a panelist, we'll be posting those directly in the chat. And we're also recording tonight's event, and we'll post it and the resources on rvaengage.org as soon as it's available, so you can share it with friends that weren't able to make it. But if you have any questions along the way, feel free to drop those in the chat, and we'll get to those as soon as we can. Okay, and I think it's time for our first poll of the evening. Once again, we're going to post this right up here. You should be able to answer it. What barriers keep you from engaging more in the arts? And we'll give everyone 30 seconds here to answer the question. So what barriers keep you from engaging more in the arts? Okay, so we've got those results. That was pretty quick. So 70% said time restraints, 20% said cost, and then 15% said lack of awareness about arts happenings in my area. So those are interesting poll results. I think all three of those will actually be addressed in the conversation this evening. We'll hear about some great community calendars that will address the lack of awareness about happenings in the area. We'll leave you with great resources on how to find those things. Cost, there'll be some conversations about free art that you can enjoy throughout the city. Time restraints, there'll also be conversations about art that you can enjoy on your own leisure time. You don't need to show up at any specific time. You can kind of explore on your own time. So hang tight. I think you'll get some interesting responses to all of those. So without further ado, I'd like to take a second to introduce Scott Garka, president of CultureWorks. He's going to, discuss how our arts community is a tremendous asset to the region, with multiple layers of impact ranging from personal growth and community connections to educational and economic development and benefit. So, Scott, without further ado, I'm going to pass it to you.
Thank you, Macaulay. So I joined CultureWorks about 9 years ago, because I wanted to find ways to take what was my business skills. I started my career as a CPA, but I've always been a singer and an actor all my life as well. And I wanted to find a way to take my business skills and help others pursue their passion for the arts and drive a greater community impact. Why did I think it was important to do that? Well, I think arts and culture can really uplift us. It can heal us. It can inspire us, educate us, even transform us, and help us to find our better selves, whether that's as individuals or as a community. And so for all those reasons, about 9 years ago, I joined CultureWorks. CultureWorks is a nonprofit focused on strengthening artists and arts and cultural organizations and increasing their impact in the community. And if we go to the next slide, since I joined CultureWorks, arts and culture has been making headlines for lots of great reasons across the region. We just got a few of them here on the slide. One of the most recent ones at the bottom here, USA Today's Reader's Choice called Richmond one of the 10 best arts districts in the country. And if you look at these other items on the list, I'm sorry, someone's having a hard time hearing me. I am as close to my microphone as I can be. I will try and speak up. Is that better for the person? Well, I'll try and keep talking. So talking about Richmond making, sorry, I'm having trouble managing the chat and my points. So Richmond's making these headlines, and when you look at these headlines here, it's incredible what we're being named for. Best cities to live in the U.S., right? When you think about where we're living, a lot of people take it for granted, and yet others find it to be one of the best cities in the U.S. Why are we making all these headlines? If you go to the next slide, Sid, it's because we have over 200 nonprofit arts and culture organizations. Here I've pictured 3 of the larger organizations that many of us probably know. On the left, that's the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts and the Chihuly exhibit out behind the Best Cafe. On the right, kind of a giveaway, the November Theater for Virginia Repertory Theater. And in the middle, quick chance for folks to exercise your chat skills. Anyone care to guess what's pictured in the middle there? Anyone? Bueller? Thank you, Catherine Thompson. It is not Maymont. Pretty close. It is a park. So that's Crump Park. That's the Richmond Symphony in their big tent at Crump Park for one of their 4th of July. Oh, Daniel Ripperton got it. Yeah, so that's their 4th of July celebration at Crump Park. It's a fantastic experience. If you go to the next slide, I show you some of the smaller organizations that make up these 200 nonprofit arts and cultural organizations. So 1708 Gallery is a contemporary art gallery in the Arts District on Broad Street. Originally started as a stepping stone for artists coming out of VCU's School of the Arts. In the middle, we have one of our panelists' own Richmond Triangle Players. I'll let Phil Crosby later speak to what they do. And James River Ringers is a small handbell choir, and both the large and the small organizations make up this, and mid-size, I should say. These are not all small organizations here, but it's that variety, that breadth of arts and culture that helps us create this creative vibe that is a part of the fabric of what makes arts and what makes Richmond what it is today. So if you move to the next slide, please. Why is arts and culture important? Well, making headlines is nice, but there's a greater impact here for arts and culture. As I said earlier, it helps us find our better selves as a community. Certainly there's impacts for us as individuals. Arts and culture, I'm a singer and an actor. I love arts and culture for art's sake. I think it brings tremendous beauty into our world. But CultureWorks exists because it drives a greater impact for the community as well, in terms of economic impact, education benefits for our community, and together those things form stronger communities. And I'm going to talk a little bit about each of those. If we go to the next slide, Sid. CultureWorks was formed to really harness those impacts, those economic impacts, education impacts, and social impacts. It was formed as a result of a regional cultural action plan almost 12 years ago, where the local employers saw what was happening in our region and wanted to harness the impact of what was then an emerging art scene. And so from that, they did a regional cultural action plan that concluded we needed to have a champion for arts and culture. And so CultureWorks was formed then to help guide the arts and culture organizations and artists that we had and try and corral us all to be heading in a common direction for a common goal. Not that we're all trying to do the same thing. Everyone's got their own unique value that they bring to the community, but it helps if we all are trying to march toward a few key common goals. Here on this slide, you can see what CultureWorks key strategies are for accomplishing that mission of strengthening artists and organizations. First and foremost, fostering equitable access to arts and culture. That's about arts and culture should be by and for everyone in our community. And so CultureWorks spends a great deal of effort to lift up underrepresented voices and ensure that arts and culture is reflective of and made up by all the people in our region. We are also aiming to fortify that creative and cultural environment through collaboration and connectivity. A lot of what CultureWorks does is bringing organizations and artists together to be able to work with each other and problem solve with each other. And then we also aim to generate generate an increased creative capacity by the arts and culture organizations and artists. We do that two ways. One, through grant making, but also through non-financial support by bringing artists together and providing training, education, and networking opportunities. For all those reasons, we don't do the work for accolades, but it is nice to be recognized by the community from time to time. We were thrilled back in 2018 to be recognized by the Valentine and what was then the Capital Region Collaborative as a Richmond history maker for shaping the quality of life in the region. And we were also recognized in 2021 by the Association of Fundraising Professionals. Their Central Virginia chapter recognized us for a relief program that we created for artists and organizations during the pandemic. So thrilled to be able to do that kind of work in the community. I'll move to the next slide. So I talked a little bit about economic impact. So if you think about the last time you went to go see a gallery exhibit or a show, perhaps at Richmond Triangle Players, think about what you did. Before you even bought a ticket, the theater companies are paying marketing people to advertise, to encourage us to want to go see that show. They're also paying painters to paint the sets for the show and electricians to run the lighting. And the curtain hasn't even gone up yet, and you're starting to see that economic impact. Then the day of the show, maybe last time I went to see a show, my wife and I went, stopped and got dinner downtown before heading out to Scott's Addition to see a show. When our kids were younger, we'd pay a babysitter. You get the idea of all the money that's going, all that money is going into our community. And so some of that is money from the organizations paying their people and their service providers. Some of that's the money that you and I spend just when we go to see a show or an exhibit. If you go to the next slide, Sid, do a little prices right here. So back in 2015, prior to the pandemic, that's the last measurement we have of the economic impact that arts and culture has. Would anyone care to put in the chat what you think the annual economic impact is of nonprofit arts and culture organizations? You put that in the chat. If we were in person, I'd have t-shirts and throw it out to you as a prize, but I don't have that ability right now. Come on, somebody take it. Somebody who doesn't work for CultureWorks or is on our board. I think Maya Earhart might have seen my presentation. It is exactly $360 million. Congratulations, Maya. So if you go to the next slide, this shows how that 360.1 million in spending breaks down. 211 million, that's the money that organizations are putting into the community. 148.4 million of that is what you and I spend when we go to see those things. In addition to that, that translates into 10,700 FTE jobs for our region. Now, that doesn't mean there's 10,700 people working in the arts. That means there's the people who work in the arts, but there's also the people that are working in the restaurants that service the folks who are going to see a show or an exhibit. That's the lawyers, the accountants that are servicing those arts organizations. A lot of part-timers make up one full FTE in those numbers. That's a lot of people who are counting on arts and culture to drive the economic impact that it does. We say arts and culture provides food for the soul, but it's putting food on the table for 10,700 folks. It's also generating $31 million in state and local revenues for critical services like police, fire, schools. And so when you hear about localities wanting to cut funding for the arts, realize it's driving a significant return on investment for them in that $30 million of state and local revenues. So it's really shooting themselves in the foot when they cut that funding. You go to the next slide, Sid. Thank you. So all those numbers I just shared are from before the pandemic, and arts and culture were hugely hit hard by the pandemic. We saw a lot of folks trying to share arts and culture through digital ways, but most had a very difficult time monetizing that. And while venues have reopened, there's ongoing audience hesitation about getting back into those audiences, going back to see live performances. And so many of the arts organizations in our community are experiencing experiencing reductions in 30 to 40% range. The good news, though, is that no arts and culture nonprofit has had to close permanently due to COVID. I added this word recently, though, and that is yet. I'm seeing more and more reality of as relief funding has been used up and is moving, no longer available. I see a lot more arts organizations that are beginning to struggle financially, which requires us all to continue to support by going to see shows and going to see exhibits and making your own contributions to those organizations to keep them afloat. I'll go to the next slide. So economic impact is one thing. I'll be happy to take your questions on that later, but more than that, arts and culture drives stronger students. There's study after study that shows that students benefit from the arts by higher test scores, better attendance, lower discipline issues, and stronger communities. The economic impact drives vitalization of communities in that you see new businesses coming in. You also see greater civic engagement, which is a part of what we're talking about today. Those that participate in the arts are more likely to vote, according to different studies from Americans for the Arts. Why is that? Because arts and culture brings an opportunity to bring people together and have conversation and drives connection, builds social cohesion when we do that. And so for all those reasons, arts and culture is driving tremendous benefits for our communities. Go to the next slide, please. So Kim asked me to address it. How can folks get engaged in the arts? It is Artober VA. Happy Artober, everyone. It's our month-long celebration of arts and culture, the whole month of October. I encourage folks to go to our website, artoberva.com, and you'll find over 1,200 arts and culture experiences that are happening all month long. You can filter by what's free. You can filter by what's happening in the West End or downtown or down in Petersburg. You can filter by what kind of art you want to see: dance, theater, music, museums, you name it. And as of yesterday, we have over 125 organizations and artists participating in Artober. There is so much going on in the month of October. It's a great time for people to enjoy something you already love. But many folks we find maybe they enjoy theater, but they don't know about our live music scene. Or maybe they love the visual arts, but don't know about our theater scene. I encourage folks to go to the calendar, choose something that you already love, and then choose something that you've never tried before. You might just find something you're going to love for a lifetime. So I encourage folks to check that out. If you go to the next slide, please. That calendar is available all year long. If you go to our website here, richmondcultureworks.org, and I know they're putting that in our in the chat as well. You can go to that same calendar. It's available all year long. Use the same filters, and many of the items on that, many of the experiences on that calendar are FREE free. Hundreds of events are free every month, and so I know cost can be a barrier. But there are a lot of free experiences that are absolutely wonderful to experience across the region. We go to the next slide. So shifting into the conversation that I think we're here for this evening. So my goal was to try and paint an overview of what the arts and culture sector looks like. But as we transition into the next conversation, Kim shared this slide with me about this framework about the continuum of impact and how arts and culture plays a role in this. And so as we look at, as you can see, it starts with what do people know? What do we believe the current state to be? And arts and culture is often a reflection of that current state, right? It's a reflective of our current society. And so constantly we see that show up in the visual and performing artwork of any given time. Mending Walls is a great example of art and culture, the visual arts in particular, focusing on what's going on in our world in the moment. And from those visual arts experiences and those performing arts experiences, we begin to get a deeper understanding of what's going on, and more importantly, to drive conversation with each other. There's a project called Antigone and Ferguson, where a composer created it back when the young man was murdered in Ferguson, Missouri, and the violence that broke out between the residents and the police in that area. This guy in New York composed a piece based on the lyrics of Greek tragedy. He was a fan of Greek tragedy. He believed people watched Greek tragedy not because we like to watch people die on stage, but because people want to look at what happened and say, what could we have done differently to keep that from happening in the first place? And I think that's very powerful. It's really tremendous to be able for two people to look at an experience on stage and say, I don't know if I would have done it that way, or if that person had done this, I wouldn't like that, or I didn't like the way they did this. You can talk about what's happening on stage instead of what the two people themselves do or don't do. It enables both parties to look at what's happening on stage and say, what would we do differently? And so that's how you begin to change attitudes, and then we can create the capacity within these organizations to then actually drive action and hopefully lasting change. Studio 23 is another arts organization in our region that part of its mission is to support artists to make change. And so I think that's what we're here to talk more about tonight, are more examples of locally how we're seeing arts and culture used to drive that kind of change. That's my prepared remarks on an overview. I did not get to watch the questions very closely. Macaulay, you want to help me out with questions?
Yeah, thanks so much, Scott. That was fantastic. We have a few questions really quickly here from the group, and then I've got one question for myself. I think we have time to get to a few of them here. So a question from Kim, does CultureWorks offer any programs for adults with intellectual development disabilities, either virtually or in person?
CultureWorks doesn't put on very many programs ourselves. Actually, we're more about promoting what the rest of the region is doing. But I'm sure there are events on our calendar that do that. If somebody wants to email me, I could do a more targeted search and make some suggestions. I'm happy to be emailed directly, scott@richmondcultureworks.org.
Fantastic. Okay, and then one more question in the chat here is, why is Virginia ranked 37th in the country in terms of per capita arts funding for state agencies? Do you have any insight on that?
Well, the why I can't really say. It's a frustrating, I mean, the why is the General Assembly not allocating funds. Why is that? That's a deeper question. It's actually one that I was looking at earlier today. So that's actually unfortunate because it was significantly increased last year. The funding that Virginia put in increased significantly last year. Still shamefully low in my opinion. I think we need to be doing better. And the Virginians for the Arts and CultureWorks are working to provide economic impact stories, the impact stories about how it's affecting our youth. The best thing we can all do is write your local representatives, let them know you think the arts are important and that they need to continue investing in the arts, and that 37th in the nation is not good enough.
I completely agree. Well, Scott, we really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us this evening. Scott's email is in the chat. So if you have any other questions for Scott, you can reach out to him directly, or you can put them here in the Q&A and we'll happily get those to Scott so that he can answer this for you. But if there's anything else, Scott, we really appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
Absolutely. So everyone, we've got a great panel for you tonight. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves here really quickly. They're going to share their name, their role in organization, and why they think arts plays such an important role in raising important issues and sparking action in our community. So Sid, if you don't mind, we'll begin with Phil Crosby, Executive Director for Richmond Triangle Players.
Hi, everybody. It's my name is Philip Crosby. I'm Executive Director, as Macaulay said, of Richmond Triangle Players, which is the longest continuously operating theater in the entire Mid-Atlantic, which is devoted to LGBTQ themes and issues. We have just finished celebrating our 30th anniversary, which means we're now entering our 4th decade, which is a pretty amazing achievement, I think, for any arts organization around. Just briefly, we are known, we have a national reputation. Playbill.com named RTP one of the 15 most important theaters of its kind in the country. We've made various lists, from tourism as like the great things to do kind of places. And we've also, for the last 2 years, been recognized by the Richmond, I have to remember its new name now, Richmond Theater Community Circle Awards, which is sort of Richmond's version of the Tony Awards. For the last 2 years, we've won awards for Best Play. There's our theater right there. One of the I'd say the cultural anchor of Scott's Edition. And we've been in that space for almost 14 years. So it's been a great neighborhood to grow up in. The plays we won, so I'll just tell you something about the theater. It's an intimate space, 95 seats, with a great bar out front. Anyone who's stopped by the theater and had one of our martinis has certainly remembered it. But it's a wonderful place to be and very welcoming, I think, to anyone who enters. The plays that we did that won the awards, this one was The Inheritance. This is one of the biggest bites we've taken out of the theater recently. This was a 6.5-hour play done over 2 nights, about a new generation of gay men having to inherit the legacy of the 80s and the AIDS epidemic and how they react to that. And it was a beautiful, beautiful work. And then the next one was the year before, a wonderful play called Sugar in Our Wounds, which written by a playwright named Donye Love, who actually has family who lives in this area. This play took place in a plantation somewhere near Richmond, actually, on the eve of emancipation, where two young male slaves fall in love with each other and don't know what that means, really, because there were no words back in the day for that. It was a lovely play, lovely play. And that's all I think we need for the short information. I'll put the website in the chat.
Awesome, fantastic. Shakira.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Shakira Jones. I'm the Youth Programs Coordinator for Virginia Community Voice. I became involved in the arts as a teenager, and I've always had a passion and love for art. This passion and love for art has grown with me as I've grown older, and I very much appreciate the amount of knowledge and insight that I've gotten as a result of my growing interests. I've also become involved in the arts because I found out there are many different forms of creative expression and styles of art, and learning new things has always been something that interests me. Arts play an important role in raising important issues and sparking action in our community because it allows organizations and communities to realize what needs to happen in their communities. An issue that has been raised in my work was safety in our communities in the South Side of Richmond. This issue came about through our survey data collection process done in 2017 that asked neighbors and communities on South Side Richmond what they would like to see changed in their communities and what needs they have for their communities. Our ARCA program, which stands for Art, Reconciliation, and Civic Advocacy, is designed and built on the need for safety in the communities on the South Side. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Shakira. We'll pass it over to Austin.
Hello, everyone. There we go. Hello, everyone. My name is Austin Oz Miles. I am a multidisciplinary painter and practicing artist and public artist here in Richmond, Virginia. I have painted quite a few murals throughout the city, and art is, let's see the question. Well, in my personal opinion, art is very important, especially in Richmond, but everywhere, mostly because public art can be used as a way to hold public conversation. You know, it can be used as a ways to hold public forum. It can be used to create safe spaces. It can be used for community healing. I myself have participated in and led many community projects that did just that. My Brown Girls Narrative mural on Hull Street was a part of that, elevating Black voices. This mural here is a mural that I did for RV Street Art Festival last year, highlighting the Brown Ballerinas for Change. And for those who might not know their name, but might recognize them as dancers, during 2020, they used their art as dancers to speak out about what was going on in the civil unrest here in Richmond. And so they took pictures in front of the monuments and several of my murals and several other murals throughout Richmond. And so that's a great opportunity for art as activism. And so I wanted to continue that conversation in this work, highlighting these young ladies who are just phenomenal individuals, but also are, you know, leaders in activism in the city. And so and public art also is one of those things that, you know, it just, once it's there, people walk past it every day, and it has a way of uplifting people. It has a way of changing their mood. It has a way of implanting different seeds of thought. And so art is extremely important. And so this is a mural that I was painting in Mississippi. And at this high school, they had taken all the art programs out, you know, and so my coming in and painting a mural and having the students participate, for some of them, it was the first time they've ever painted. And these are high school students. And so just that could spark we don't know the impact of what that could have done for these young people just in that year as they moved forward. But there was a light in their eyes while they were painting. So, all right, so on to Anjali. I look forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Austin. I don't know if you saw the chat, but your mural is someone's wallpaper on their phone, which is very, very cool.
Wow,
So
that's
shout that out
awesome.
really quickly. Anjali, I think you are here somewhere. There you are.
Hello, how are you? Hello all who are here. Thanks for taking the time out. My name is Anjali Moon. I am the founder and creative director of the Africana Independent Film Festival. Africana is a festival dedicated to elevating and celebrating the global Black narrative. We do that primarily through the space of cinema, although we do expand what it means to hold the Black story and to elevate it and tell it. We have been around as an organization for about 10 years, but we just celebrated the 8th annual Africana Independent Multi-Day Film Festival. We have the honor and responsibility of being the state's only Black-owned and Black-focused film festival. We take that very seriously. And as a Richmond girl, born and raised, a multi-generational Richmond family, it means a lot to be able to bring people from all around the globe here to Richmond at least once a year to celebrate Black storytelling in what in many ways is the birthplace of the Black American story. We host our annual event, our multi-day event, every September, typically the 3rd weekend of September. We kind of take over the Arts District. We have so many amazing community partners that open their doors to us so that we can host films all up and down Broad Street. But in addition to that, we've taken the opportunity to utilize different forms of art in storytelling. Here's a photograph of something called Her Flowers. This was a mural that we did in 2020. We all know that 2020 was a year of extreme illumination when it comes to matters that have been plaguing Black communities for a very long time. And one of those things was police brutality. Her Flowers is actually a 4-sided mural that was housed at the Valentine. We did it in their courtyard. That was designed to acknowledge the 92 Black women who had been killed at the hands of police brutality. Brought together 8 Black male artists here in Richmond to give Black men an opportunity to hold space for Black women. And they came together to create a absolutely beautiful mural. We still have this mural. It's in our storage. We hope to be able to put it back together and maybe show it off for our 10-year anniversary in 2025. But yeah, Africana, we are here, even though we do our multi-day event every September. And here you see some of the work we do with the youth, which I'll talk about. We actually are a 365-day-a-year organization. We host different workshops for the youth throughout the year. We do different programs throughout the year. And we also do corporate facilitation using film as a catalyst to open up dialogue and to push corporate culture forward. I do want to just interrupt and say, if you hear music in the background as we talk about the arts, I am next to a music venue and I think that they are doing their little test run. So please forgive any background noise. Here, this photograph is actually from this year's festival. We are at the ICA, which has been a wonderful community partner. We dipped our toe in a new pond this year. In 2022, we did our first competition. We did a screenwriters competition where we opened up the floor to BIPOC screenwriters across the state, had a competition, selected a winner. That winner became our inaugural script to screen resident. That resident, we had the opportunity to take their film from the script and actually make it into a film. What you see here is a photograph from the premiere of that film, which happened during this year's festival. It was a really amazing night. ICA was a wonderful partner. And we have just enjoyed doing this work here in Richmond. You know, for us, cinema, we believe, is a vehicle of not only holding the story, but it's the sort of vehicle, because it's audible, because it's visual, it has the opportunity to pierce the heart space in a pretty unique way. And so we love what it means to utilize this as a catalyst for conversation, for community building, for cultural awareness, and for also creating a FUBU space where Black people can be celebrated, although all people are welcome. And so that's a little bit about who we are, and we'll dig a little deeper.
Thank you so much, Anjali. So I think you can see we've got an incredible panel lined up for you this evening. So we're going to ask the group some questions. Some of them are going to be pointed to individuals and some of them will be open to the group. If you have any questions along the way, please remember to put them in the chat over here. We will get to them at the end. We've got some built-in time for the Q&A component, because I'm sure all of you have some great questions for the group. My first question actually was sparked a little bit by Lachelle's comment on having Austin, your mural as their backdrop to their phone. I'm curious, how do you see the role of artists and creators evolving in the digital age, and how has technology changed the way we engage with art for social change?
That's an interesting question. I think it's an interesting question because I think in the upcoming of AI, a lot of artists are having a lot of pushback against AI, and that being kind of like a hindrance for artists receiving credit and for copyright issues and all types of things like that. But in terms of using technology, social change, I would say like a more, I guess, diluted but everyday use of that would be social media. You know, I feel like in the use of social media as a technology, we are able to reach so many people with our messages, with our voices, people who might not ever see that mural in person, but then still feel it and it resonates with them, and the message is then received. Like, for example, that mural about the brown ballerinas for change, you know, their images went viral, you know, and so like so many people, millions, thousands, so many people were able to experience what they had to say. And so I think in that aspect, technology is a friend. Some technology can be a tool for us to use to get our messages out there.
Fantastic. I appreciate that. And there's been a lot of recent conversation around AI, you know, around artists and intellectual property. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out in the next few weeks and even months, because it's so quickly evolving and ever changing. I feel like the second we get our finger on the pulse, something has shifted. So I'm eager to see how that shakes out. Philip, a question for you. In what ways can different art forms, visual arts, music, literature, and for you specifically theater, uniquely contribute to social change discussions? You mentioned a show that you all feature that spanned 2 days, but how do those contribute uniquely to those conversations?
Sorry. Oh, I'm good.
Yeah.
I have always thought, and it's really the core of my belief system about theater, and this would certainly apply to other forms as well, but I greatly believe that telling stories in a communal setting can change the world. I mean, that's why we do what we do, is to gather people together in a I mean, I think theaters are holy spaces. So to gather people together in a space to share an experience, and to come out maybe changed in a way. I mean, our theater was founded 30 years ago because no theaters in Richmond would touch LGBTQ material. We were just coming out of the AIDS epidemic. coming into the AIDS epidemic in Richmond, there's still a lot of shame pointed towards gay men in particular for that. And so the topics weren't being discussed, and that's why we had to do this theater company, or what we felt we needed to tell the stories from our community. And while we're still telling the stories, our audiences changed. Probably over 60% of our audience would identify as allies. And that's been kind of purposeful. So I like to think that in a way that is how you go about making change in your community, is by telling those stories and making and the important part is making sure that the people who need to hear them hear them.
I love that. You had mentioned, the intent behind starting the organization in Richmond Triangle Players, because there were obviously challenges behind no one else doing it and supporting it. So this is more for the group. So feel free to chime in, anyone who's got a response. What challenges do artists and activists face today when using their art for social change, and how can those challenges be overcome? Whether it's creating an organization, sharing your own personal art, what are those challenges, and how can we overcome them?
So in my opinion, I feel like a lot of the challenges come from when you don't want to make art that is about social change. I think that sometimes, yes, art can be very political, but in some moments you just want to paint. For me, I just want to paint a Black woman in existing, like, why does it have to be political in that sense? And of course, and so I feel like there's a lot of support if you do want to do social change projects, and they're very necessary. But when you want to just exist and have a conversation about that, I feel like it's kind of passed over. I don't know if I'm alone in that, but that would be something that I've noticed in the arts community in Richmond.
Can I ask you to restate your question, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was how, what challenges do artists and activists face today when using their art for social change, and how can those challenges be overcome?
Well, I think for me, I don't consider myself an artist. We are a platform for artists, but we do activate artists' work in different ways. And, of course, we are in times where political views certainly are impacting the way you show up socially. I know that there are times when we've been invited to come into spaces and facilitate conversation using film as a catalyst, but they really want to keep the conversation in a very defined box, like with very specific parameters, because of the political climate, because not wanting to push the envelope too far. And for me, that presents a challenge, because it's in the pushing of that envelope that change occurs. Everything else, feels performative and cyclical. And as a person who's grown up in Richmond, I think that we've made tremendous strides. And I want for us to continue to push forward, and not feel too comfortable that we made a little progress and we can just kind of sit here in the middle and just kind of act like we're still doing something when we aren't really. And so I like to see art used, and just conversation, community used in a way where it's genuinely purposeful, especially if you're creating a space that is defining itself as purposeful. And so one of the things that I'm afraid of is that we sometimes lean into the space of performance when the stakes are a bit too high for that. And so, yeah.
Appreciate that. Roscoe, as an artist yourself, what challenges do you see artists facing right now? And if you faced any recently, how have you overcome them?
To kind of piggyback off of the last few comments. I think sometimes what the issue is, and speaking as like a a person of color living in this country, when you have an identity that has been politicized, when there's legislation around how you show up in the world, it's hard for you to it's hard to not create work that feels political, right? Because you're trying to kind of normalize an identity that people are not yet comfortable with, or parts of that identity that people are not yet comfortable with. And so any act of creativity feels almost revolutionary, right? Because you're trying to get people to constantly accept you. And I think that by itself is the main obstacle, right? When you have some type of marginalized voice. And so, I think often the question is like, where do people who have marginalized voices go where they can just create and it doesn't have to feel politically charged in some way? And I think that that is a question that I'm still asking. I think that spaces like what Africana has created is doing that, though, right? It's just a place where you just get to celebrate, right? It doesn't have to feel revolutionary. It doesn't have to feel political. It doesn't have to feel like it's making a statement all the time. It's just a celebration of those voices. And so creating more spaces like that, I think, is the challenge. So that people who who are oppressed in this country can exist in a space where they can just be a creative without also being an activist.
Love
Well
that.
said, both of you. But well said.
I think what Roscoe is saying is so important, and that's why support from spaces like the community foundations of the world and the cultural works of the world and others is extremely important. So that these spaces where people can just authentically show up and be themselves. That's why the longevity of a place like the Triangle Theater is extremely important. They created a space like, this is for us, this is by us. We are welcome here to be our full and complete selves, and the people who want to support us feel welcome to come here. And Black people, BIPOC people should have those exact same sort of spaces. And again, as Phil said, there are allies that come into the space, so anybody is welcome in. But it's important for the people to know that this is designed to be a reflection of you and your most authentic and pure and relaxed self. And so, I appreciate what you're saying, Roscoe, about Africana. We really do strive for it to be that, and strive by just being, right? Like, by just being. And so I appreciate that you feel like that as an artist yourself, just showing up. But that is also part of the challenge, Makalki, is what it means to have that level of support. One of the beautiful things about a Triangle Players is that they have a brick and mortar where people know I can go here every Tuesday, every Thursday. And you don't see that for Black arts organizations. It's beautiful that we have such an amazing and supportive community that opens their doors so that we can host the sort of, events that we want to do. And I don't mean just Africana, I just mean in general. But the importance of having a space as well, I think, is also part of that, because when you want to be an ally, you know where to find the people. When people need a space of refuge and just to come and be, they know that they have a space they can just come and be. And we have very few of those in the city of Richmond that are owned by Black folks. And so I think that that's a level of progress I'd love to see.
Can I chime in on that? I agree with you wholeheartedly, because I think we're very blessed. I mean, it was a lot of work over 30 years to build and maintain the space, but we're blessed that we've got it now and we have the space. You said it better than I could, about a space where we can be our authentic selves and tell our authentic stories, and people who come in are going to hear it, right? And they're going to want to, they're coming in with open ears. So I will just expound on one of the things you said about the need for support. Like you, I don't consider myself an artist, or I haven't really been for any number of years. It's not been my focus, but my job is to create a space where artists can do work. And so the raising of the money and the making sure the lights are on, and meeting with boards and meeting with supporters and doing that kind of work that I do is all for the service of artists and making sure that we can continue to do it. And so I think that's a piece that sometimes gets lost in the conversation about making art. You do need the safe place in which to create, right? And gather. I think gathering is really important. Was for us as a queer community to have a safe space to there you go, to gather and be who we are and decide which stories matter.
Fantastic. We've spoken a lot about organizations kind of supporting and amplifying arts. Shakira, specifically, are there ways that we can ensure youth kind of come along this journey with us and that they're involved in these conversations later down the road, that they're supportive, that they're sitting, in these important positions at the heads of the table to represent all of these voices?
Can you repeat the first part of your question?
Are there ways that we can ensure that the youth is brought along for this conversation on engaging with artists and making sure that they have safe spaces to kind of enact social change and share their art?
Yes, there are ways that we can ensure that youth are involved. We can first start off by making sure that they feel heard and make sure that they know that their opinions, not theirs, matter in the programs and social change movements that we are participating in.
And do you currently, your organization, I mean, are you partnering any youth with arts organizations, or can you speak to a few projects that you guys are working on that kind of help the youth artists share their expertise and interests?
Yes, right now we're doing a program called ARCA. It stands for Art, Reconciliation, and Civic Advocacy. We are partnered with Hamilton Glass of Minden Walls and Alfonso Perez Acosta of A Drawing Table. And every year, whether it be summer, fall, winter, or spring, we work with them to create murals, panels, tables, park benches, rock gardens, anything creatively within our means to help push our youth artists, to achieve their creative freedom, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Outside of youth specifically, does the group have any advice for individuals who want to use their creative talents to inspire conversation and actions for social change on how they can get involved, whether it's specifically within your organization, whether it's, they've wanted to paint a mural forever and they just haven't? Any advice for any individuals?
The advice I would give to individuals who would want to use their own creative talents to inspire conversations and actions for social change in their communities would be first to identify the driving force behind their art and what it represents, not only in their eyes, but in their viewers' eyes as well. I will also say that identifying their goals, objectives, or missions for their art piece is an important aspect too. In order to inspire conversations and actions for social change in your community, you have to find out what inspires you and use that creative force to drive your point home and spark those necessary conversations and actions needed to embark and embrace social change in your communities.
And that's fantastic. I think almost everyone here has been inspired to do what they do, either filling a gap that wasn't filled or kind of seeing the need for social change. So does anyone else have any kind of commentary on that? Anjali, Phil, Austin, Roscoe?
I would say, just to piggyback off of Shakira, it all starts with your idea. If you are identifying a need and you have an idea, that it all starts there. And I think all of us on this panel have had an idea and then found who we can take the idea to, whether it's needing a resource, whether it's partnering with another artist, whether it's finding a team, to best kind of cultivate that. If you want to paint a mural and you have this idea and you have something to say, reach out to a muralist. You can reach out to me. I'll put my email address as well as my website and Instagram and all that in the chat as well. You can reach out to me as a resource, and just especially if you've never painted one before and you need to learn how to do it. Or if you're looking for funding, CultureWorks has grants every year. That is a great opportunity. And there's a lot of other opportunities as well. You know, if you're not sure where, reach out to someone who's doing it already. And so that's what I would suggest. But I would say just start with the idea and reach out to your community of people who can assist you and help bring that idea to light. And just do it. Just start it. You know, like so many campaigns start on social media. You know, honestly, I'm not even a big fan of social media. I don't know why I'm giving them so many plugs, but it's an unfortunate truth that social media has a big way to, it is very present in our lives of how we process news, how we receive and put out information. So use social media, start talking about it, start making things online, and then just sharing it. So that's what I would suggest.
To
I
just
want to jump in. Go ahead, Phil.
no, you go, Roscoe.
So a couple of things. And so actually to like kind of pick up where Austin left off about social media, and we were earlier talking about youth engagement. The youth exist on social media, like the internet is everything. And there's a number of platforms where you can reach youth, or you can start to kind of build more youth-led things. I think that as we start to, as we have more conversations around creating more spaces for artists, particularly if we're trying to reach the next generation of creatives, then I would love to see more like youth ambassadors, or just youth kind of sitting at the table to have these conversations when we're sitting in these rooms with nonprofits or with schools and thinking about, oh, what are the kids going to like, or what are the kids going to enjoy? We probably should get some kids to like, you know, have some say so and what this looks like, right? They may not have all the ideas, but they can definitely help kind of push the conversation forward and help the old people here, you know what I mean, figure out how to best serve them, so that they have more spaces where they can just be celebrated and when they can be creatives and operate in a space of joy and not always in a space of you know, being political or revolutionary or what have you. Not that they shouldn't be making art that, you know, create social change. But we were also talking about how to create spaces where you can show up as your authentic self and not have to feel like you're making a political statement all the time, right? Because the beauty in that in children is that they just want to create for the sake of creating, right? They just want the art to be art. And they may end up making a political statement and not even knowing it, but they come into it wanting the art to be fun and wanting it to feel authentic and feel genuine. And so if we can find more ways to create genuine, sincere conversations around what they're looking for, we can create spaces that can better serve them. And then for anybody who's looking to get involved in the arts community, it's like Austin said, reach out to an artist. I don't have an artist in my circle that's not willing to share information, right? Tell you about events, you know, give you a few pointers, a little quick one-on-one, like how do you do this? How do you get this started? I operate in poetry and spoken word. That's my discipline. There are a number of open mics, poetry slams, writing circles, you know, a number of like writing groups where people can come and talk to other artists, get feedback on their work. And it's iron sharpens iron, right? It's a lot of artists, new artists, veteran artists who are, you know, helping each other along the way and pushing each other forward so that we can create better artists and better writers and better performers on stage. So, yeah, reach out to an artist. I think social media is a great way to do that. If you have an artist that you've seen locally that you were impressed by, just shoot them, you know what I mean? Like shoot them a text. I mean, shoot them, slide in their DM, not that way, but like, you know what I mean? Like professionally, like slide in their DM professionally and just kind of pick their brain about their art and about their process and how they may plug you into all these different social spaces.
And I'm sure that other people had things to say, but I just want to piggyback off of Roscoe and say, don't get discouraged if you don't get a response to your DM. Sometimes it takes just showing up, you know, like when you're interested in a discipline, sometimes you just gotta show up where people are at, you know, and I know I did that when I first started out. My friend Ned, she is a phenomenal artist and muralist now. but in 2020, I met her because she was just volunteering to help me and Nico on our mending wall. And her being there taught her how to make murals. And then she got her own mending wall, you know, and just being around and just showing up for to places where you can meet like-minded individuals and people who have done what you're doing. And then you get mentorship through that. You get guidance. You can learn what you don't want to do. You know, maybe you hate murals. I hated it my first day. I told him I was going to quit. And then I didn't. And then I loved it, you know, but it is hard work. But, you know, you learn these things about what yourself and what your actual interests are when you show up to the place to participate. So.
Yeah, I started like with Tuesday Versus, like I just showed up and it was this open mic and I just loved the space. I love the energy. I love the vibe. It was artists that I wanted to be around. And I remember walking up to Lorna and I'm like, yo, how can I be down? What can I do? I'll do whatever. I'll help fold up chairs after the show is over. Like I'll help you set up. Like I just wanted to be there and collaborate and learn and grow and fellowship. And she brought me in, like that whole squad just kind of brought me in and like I found a family, I found a community. And I grew from there. Like I blossomed because I was around other like-minded people, like Austin was saying.
Phil, I know you wanted to say something.
Actually, you all have said it just beautifully. I think it's our responsibility as older artists to welcome younger artists into our places, right? I know starting out, I was blessed to work with some folks who at the time were pretty famous, and they all were absolutely wonderful people. All they wanted to do, anyone who's worked hard to get where they are in life is willing to share their lives with other people, right? So if all now in this point in my life, I really want to do is share what I know. Some of it's still relevant, some of it maybe not so much, but you know, I just want to be able to share with younger folks what I know, and also provide them with skills if they need them, to make sure art continues, to make sure this all keeps flowing and keeps going and doesn't end because one of us leaves the city or leaves the room or, you know, passes on. I think the immortality of what we can create is such an important part of what we can give to our communities, the longevity of it.
I mean, I'll just, you know, I won't piggyback because poor Piggy, his back is just so heavy now. But I do want to just kind of agree with the idea of just doing it, right? I think sometimes we can get in our heads a lot about, you know, I don't have this, I'm not ready for that, you know, am I good enough for this? And just start. You know what I mean? Like that has been the lesson that I've learned with Africana. I don't have a background in film. I started just with an idea and a phone call, and I got a couple of people say, no, we don't want to host it. And then people started saying yes. And, you know, then things started to shift. And all of that was just from I'm just going to try. And so I think that advice that you're giving Oz of just do it is extremely important. And yes, I think we need to understand social media as the tool that it is. But I think the best advice that came out from you, Oz, was go out, go to the thing, meet the people, you know, because I think that there's such value in the interpersonal relationships that we can create in person when we have the opportunity to do too. Now, if you want to talk to an artist, you know, that's not in your city, that's another thing. But if they're right here in your city, just show up. Say, hey, I think your work is dope. Just want to introduce myself, you know, and talk a little bit about yourself. Because what I find in Richmond is that the biggest resource is relationships. And so if you can put yourself in spaces to begin to develop strong relationships, I think that is key. And I think that really gets drilled home when you can talk to people, look them in their face, they can hear the tone of your voice and understand your sincerity. And so that would be something I would champion.
So let's say someone can't jump behind Nike's saying and slogan of just doing it, but they really want to support the work that you all are pioneering and that you're doing as kind of the movers and shakers and creators that you are. how can they do that? They want to be involved in the arts. They don't want to make the leap themselves to create, but they want to support you. In what ways can they show up, and what best serves the art that you all are creating?
My Cash App is Africana
Okay.
Film.
Hey, that
We
is
gotta
a
do
need
that
for
at the
sure.
same time. First.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Buy art, buy tickets to see to some plays, come to buy tickets to the events that Roscoe and Anjali are having. Show up, and I'm not sure, Shakira, how, but maybe make donations to that organization. Like, purchase, and funds matter. We didn't get to the funding and lack thereof in type of conversation here in Richmond, but purchase art. An artist like me, I buy a painting, or come to the volunteer opportunities that when I'm painting in the community, because even though volunteering at mural projects can be it might feel like something small, but not only are you contributing to your community, but it really helps me a lot in the terms of how much gets done in a short period of time. When you have 20 people painting versus little old me, just trying to, it really does, a lot gets done in a short period of time. And so that's substantial as well. But purchasing art, buying tickets, making donations, all of that really matters to help small artists or independent artists, organizations. That goes a long way. And we can build off of that as well and keep making all the things that are making such an impact in the city.
I know for theaters, exactly. I mean, participate and come. I know every theater in local theater in town has varieties of ticket prices. I mean, if you can afford the top price, please pay it. That's great. If you can't, we all have pay what you can programs where you can just come to certain nights and give us what you can just so that you can be a part of the experience, student prices, all that. And the other thing I just like to say is for those who can contribute, one of the things that a program that has been just successful for everybody is we try to create some curated experiences for those donors that you don't necessarily get if you don't contribute. So people like access, people like to get close to artists that they can't necessarily see. So could you have a one-on-one with a director or a choreographer? Can you come to the first reading of the play and start to see how the sausage gets made? I went on a film set one time, and that to me was worth I bought it at an auction, but it was so worth the money because I saw something being made that I've never seen made before. And so those kind of experiences, I think the organizations can then give back and say thank you to the people who have bought and participated. But yeah, if you can and you can support, do support, because it's so very important.
I mean, yeah, artists need money to create more art. And if you enjoy the art that people are making, just know that artist does need money in order to keep making the art. Like, just how it works. I mean, we live in a world we live in a system of capitalism, right? And the key word there is capital, right? You need funds in order to continue on. And then donating your time kind of and yes, poor Piggy, to kind of piggyback on, we need a different animal at this point. To kind of piggyback on what Philip was saying, you can, if you can't donate your money, you can donate your time. I know we have several events that are coming up this month, as a matter of fact, and in November. And we do need volunteers to kind of help usher and, help with, working the door and all that kind of things. And those things, mean a lot too, right? Because if we don't have these things put in place, then it's hard to run an event. And if it's hard to run an event, then it's hard for that event to continue on. So find, to donate however you can, whether that's supporting a show or finding other ways. We have a big poetry slam coming up at the end of the month, October 28th, and we've had a number of organizations sponsor tickets for people who couldn't afford them. And so in return, we're like, yeah, that's a noble thing. Let's shout you out. you know what I mean, on our social media, on our platforms, and drive some business your way. So we've had like a few mental health services, therapists and psychologists, reach out and sponsor some tickets because art is a therapeutic process and it can be very healing, a healing experience. And they believe in art as that. And so we shouted them out on our social media, right? We've sent people their way. So, it's almost like a very, almost a bartering system, if you will, sometimes. And like Anjali was saying, like a lot of it's about relationships, building relationships. So build those relationships, come out and support and build that community.
And I'll just say too, I think that the giving of the time is really important, Roscoe, like you were saying, and also understanding maybe you don't have the time to volunteer at a particular event, but maybe you have a skill set that an organization could utilize. Are you an accountant and this is a small nonprofit? Or are you willing to donate some of your time and say, hey, look, do you have anybody working your books? Do you need any help with that? What does it mean to give in kind? Do you manage a restaurant and say, do your volunteers need any food? Like that sort of thing. There are so many ways to be supportive. And so thinking about the rooms that you occupy, the spaces in which you may have some level of influence or authority, and how can you leverage that to be supportive to the organizations that you think are doing good work. So sometimes it's just about thinking a little bit outside of the box. Money is great, always need the cash. But in addition to that, there are other ways to show up that make a huge difference, especially for smaller orgs that are looking to be sustainable, really plant their flag and grow. And the reason that most of those organizations are able to get there is because they have support coming from so many different angles. And so Anjali at AfricanaFilmFestival.org if you are interested.
I love that point though, of just, if it's not a fiscal or monetary donation, just collaborating with the organization or individual to really get creative. I mean, that's truly the beauty in these relationships, and even art in general is just collaborating and creating this beautiful end result here. So I've got one more question, but we also have a few more minutes for audience questions. So if you've got any of them, the panelists are here and we'll get to those in a second. Please put those in the chat. So group, everyone feel free to answer this one. It'll kind of be a free-for-all round robin, and our last questions to round it out here tonight. But so we've talked a lot about social media. Social media aside, I'm sure it'll come up, but as we look to the future, what trends are you all seeing emerging in the intersection of art, social change, and activism? Are there things that are bubbling up to the surface? Do you see kind of a trajectory towards a specific path? What's happening behind the scenes? What are you all noticing?
I know there's a trend just in theater now, in terms of audiences coming back and all of that from COVID, but there is some weariness from folks about all of the trauma in the world that's going on. And of course, artists are drawn to it and trying to make sense of the trauma and the drama in the world and try to make sense of it and put it together. And I've noticed in some of our audiences the desire to disengage from anything that hurts to experience. And so I think one of the challenges moving forward is how do we continue to make progress and re-engage those people. I don't think you can do it without it hurting ever, right? But I think we need to figure out how we take those people who've just run away and are saying, I can't anymore, to say, no, you got it, come on back. Let's figure out a way to talk and have this conversation. So I see that as a big thing. I'm sure we're all coping with.
I am seeing a positive trend in the number of events that have popped up or currently happening in Richmond. And again, I'm speaking from a place of like spoken word, and so there's a number of like open mics. There's been a number of like poetry-based and spoken word-based showcases where from a number of organizations, right, where For a while, it might have been just the Writers' Den that have been putting on a lot of these, but there are other places that are now like doing these things more frequently. There's more poetry slam teams that have popped up just in the city and in Virginia that send teams to these national competitions so that these artists can get more visibility and see other parts of the other parts of the country and show their art in other places, right? And this is, again, this is how we grow more artists. So I'm excited to see that. I'm excited to see that there are so many events happening to the point where it's like, oh man, I can't make it to everything. I think that's a great problem to have in a city, and so I'm excited to see that. And I think people are, I think post-pandemic, a bit of cabin fever kind of happens, and so I think that people are going out to live events more, right? And they are coming to see these things that are happening in the city, and I think people are excited about that. So I hope that continues.
I saw Victoria Monet last night. You could not move in the crowd. People are back and excited about art, I think. Well, unless anyone else has any kind of closing remarks, that was my last question for the panel. Attendees, if you've got any last minute questions, throw them over here in the chat. We're going to throw out a last poll for everyone. And it's going to be, how would you like to participate in the arts? So whether that's attending an exhibit or performance, cultivating your own skills, participating in volunteer. We kind of touched on this a little bit in conversation. So I'm interested to kind of see the results here and see where we land. While we're working on that, I think someone had mentioned, are there spoken word events on Culture Works or Style Weekly calendars? Yes, so you can absolutely find those. Both calendars have content across all of art. So you can submit spoken word, live theater, art walks, studio galleries. So you should be able to narrow those down very specifically on both sites. And those are all community curated. So if you have events coming up, you can submit those to those calendars as well. So we got the results back. 55% want to attend an exhibit or performance. So 27 cultivate your own skills. Roscoe said that he provides poetry lessons. So just slide in his DMs. I'm joking. 45 want to volunteer. So we're providing a ton of resources for you in the chat and also after the call. All of these individuals and organizations, I'm sure, have volunteer opportunities. So please visit their links and check out the work that they're doing. I'm sure they can all use help along the way in forms of volunteering.
Can I offer something to the people who actually put this event together?
Please.
I know that this is an ongoing conversation where different people from different sectors are being brought to the fore. The thing about all spaces, and especially Richmond, is that it's an ecosystem and it's a web, it's all interconnected. I wonder what it would look like, just a suggestion, like at the end of this series, for all of the people who were panelists over time to have a space to actually meet each other and see like what it means when we think about relationships, when we think about community building. We're artists or people who work in the arts sector, but that doesn't exist without the corporate sector. It doesn't exist without the governmental sector. And all of these things are connected. So if there's a space, I don't know if it's a large panel, it could just be, a toast that we all have together. But just an opportunity to this community of people that you've curated so thoughtfully to bring them all together to actually connect. I just like to throw that out there.
I love that idea. Finding the intersection between all 4 or 5 discussions, I think, would be extremely interesting and also informative and helpful. There's got to be some crossover there that I'm sure would help benefit and move the city forward.
And I think having more funders at these tables would be important too, to hear more directly from the artists. I mean, individuals, of course, but certainly foundations, corporate funding folks who often have their own agendas, which is great for what they want to fund, but sometimes I'm not sure they're right on top of what the community needs.
Absolutely. Well, this can all be shared with them afterwards. Like I mentioned, we recorded tonight. So if you know any of those individuals, please share this conversation with them. Outside of any questions that have been asked, if you have any feedback, we'd love to receive it. There's a SurveyMonkey link in the chat right now that you can submit. But other than that, we just want to thank everyone for participating. Thank everyone who was behind the scenes putting this all together. And I just want to say a massive thank you to this panel. I am leaving feeling inspired. It really is an honor to chat with all of you and pick your brain and learn a little bit about what each and every one of you are doing to propel the city forward. Richmond is lucky to have you. And I hope that we all get to continue to see you flourish. So
Thank you, Macaulay.
absolutely. Thanks everyone for joining us. We'll see you at the
Thank you
next
so
one.
much.
Great meeting everyone too. Yes, y'all have a good night.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Join us.